Hey everyone, Jason here, digital marketing consultant, and in this time blocking strategy guide, you're going to learn the simple 7-step process for effectively using Google Calendar to stay on top of your daily structure, and of course make sure you get all of those important to-dos checked off your list. Timestamp table of contents in the description, along with some other helpful productivity videos on strategies I've developed to stay on top of the endless to-do lists and things you have to do to grow your business. So with that, let's go ahead, jump right in. Before we dive into the 7 steps of using Google Calendar and how I've specifically used it over the past 2 years to grow my digital agency, let's go ahead and start with calendars. Now, something that's different compared to what other videos you may have seen in the past is I don't go crazy with the number of calendars I have, and that's simply because if you're going to have calendars that you're sharing with your team, it's actually not advantageous to have a lot of calendars because it's going to be hard for people to see your appointments. So here I have my main calendar, which I just call Founder. Then we have a team vacation calendar. I have a calendar for sales calls or strategy calls with potential clients. I have a calendar for current client calls, and then family and health. So as we go through these 7 steps, these are the calendars I use. Reminders and tasks are calendars that Google just has there for you. I personally don't use them because I use Asana for all my project management. Link in the description to how I use that. But the first thing we want to do here is identify our stones. And stones are things that are already set in stone. I know it sounds silly. You can call it whatever you want, but these are the things that have already been planned or you don't have any control over, like a part-time or full-time job, family obligations, vacations, whatever it may be. So I'm going to go ahead and start turning on some calendars so you can see the stones that I have set. Now in this particular week, I don't have any sales or client calls already scheduled, but if I click on the vacation calendar and my main calendar, you'll see that I have 2 meetings that are already set up. These are actually weekly meetings, so they're always there. And then you can see I'm actually going to be out of town starting at the end of the week. Now what's really nice is if you're working with other people and everyone has the same vacation calendar, anytime someone else on the team is taking a vacation, as you'll see later in this tutorial, I'll easily be able to see when they're gone. So I don't have to worry about asking or knowing if someone is or isn't going to be available to answer questions. So this is the very first step. You may have more stones, you may have no stones at all. If you don't, awesome. But essentially, it's important that you just start your time blocking realistically with what has already been planned. And once you've already identified the things that have been planned and can't be moved, then the next step is setting a frame for your day. And I know this is going to sound very elementary, but we want to start and an end date for the entire day. Simply, when are we going to bed? When are we waking up? So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my health calendar now, and now we can see when I'm waking up and when I'm going to sleep. Now you can see on Friday, I plan on staying up a little later because it's Friday and I want to spend time with friends and family. So even if you're going to have a wonky sleep schedule, you're not going to wake up at the same time or go to bed at the same time, it's important that you plan those out so you can be really cognizant and aware of, oh, if I have to stay up late on this particular day because of XYZ, then maybe I shouldn't plan on getting as much done the next day. So having this frame makes sure that you're realistic with the rest of your time blocks. Obviously, you don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. I just happen to be traveling, and all of my clients need me to be available at 4 a.m. my time so that it's a reasonable time in their time zone. So wherever you decide to wake up, just plan it. So the next step here would actually be parsing out when you're going to be eating your meals, and then of course if you plan on having any workouts. And this is just simply putting yourself and your body first to make sure that you take care of yourself, because at the end of the day, we're not robots. We need to eat and we need some sort of recharge or relaxation or working out. So in this particular example, I'm going to put breakfast from 9 to 10 a.m. and I'm going to add it to my health calendar, and then I'm just going to go ahead and click save. Now something you can do if it's going to happen multiple times is I can come in here and click on the settings and then click on does repeat, and I can make it monthly, weekly. We're not going to go into all the different ones. I typically go to custom, and then I'll set the end date for the end of the quarter. So I typically set up these time blocks so that they go through a 3-month period. So I'm not trying to schedule out, 6 or 9 months in advance. Things change, right? So now if we go to the next week, we'll see that breakfast is always going to be there. So we'll go back to our sample week here. And of course, To save yourself time, you can actually come into your settings, and when you click on custom, we can make it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then go ahead and click done. I'm gonna save and update all the events. So now we know this is when our breakfast is. So you'd want to go through the same process, the other meals that you're eating, and of course, if you have any workouts. For me, I like working out at the end of the day, so I'm gonna set up my workouts at 3. Choose health as my calendar, and then I'm going to go to more options, custom, and I'm gonna set it up to repeat 3 times a week and set my end day to the end of the quarter, and I'll go ahead and click save. So with that, we're finally ready to start time blocking our actual work because we've identified our appointments and we've made sure that we've taken care of ourselves. Now this next step is actually called your one thing time, and this comes from Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, and it's essentially making sure that you time block the first part of your day to whatever is most important. Now if you're not sure what's most important, we'll get to that in a second, but for me, that's gonna be the first 4 hours of my day. And when you're first getting started, it might be the first 2. I started this technique when I still had a part-time job. I would wake up an hour earlier and I would get 1 hour of my one thing time in. And of course, as I became more and more aware of how successful this was, I was able to increase that time. So don't worry, you don't have to start with 4 hours in your morning. But for me, I'm going to start with my first 4 hours is going to be my one thing time. And I'm going to add it to my founder's calendar because that's where I get all of my work done. I'm going to skip the reoccurring part for time purposes, but I'm gonna go ahead and schedule it for the rest of the week. Now, once you have your one thing time, before you go on to everything else, you want to figure out, okay, if I'm giving my most valuable hours, which is the first part of my day, to my one thing, what should my one thing be? And this is where you take a look at your quarterly or annual goals and you decide what is the most important thing you can do right now in order to achieve those goals. So think of it as a giant string of dominoes. So what can you do right now in these time blocks that you're looking at in order to help you achieve that goal? Now, I'll briefly go over how we set our goals. We use something called the 4 digital business quadrants, which is essentially we set goals for internal, our team, our content strategy, what products and services we're going to develop or improve, and then of course, improving our sales process. So this is an example of what my business partner and I go through at the beginning of each quarter. I'll link in the description to a deeper dive video on how we do this, but essentially we look at our goals and then we decide which goals are most important for the quarter. And then I use week blocking to decide when I'm going to work on those goals. You'll notice here on my calendar view, in addition to the time off calendar, which is orange, you'll see that the week of the 14th, I had EM Evergreen as the entire week. I had a couple days of blog development process, and then you'll see here at the bottom, I have YT1, 2020 ASE, and ACT. So these represent goals that I want to work on. So instead of trying to be super dialed into exactly how long things are going to take, because we just don't know, what this does is this allows me at the beginning of the month, and if we go to November, you'll see that the same process was followed, where I will actually schedule out, okay, you know what, this week my one-time thing is going to be devoted to this goal. Do I know specifically what I'm going to work on? Of course not, right? Because things change. I don't know how I'm going to finish our YouTube pipeline or how I'm going to finish our foundation onboarding process for one of our client services. But I know that my one thing time is going to be devoted to whatever those dominoes are to achieve that goal. So hopefully that made sense. And this is just a way, an overarching way to make sure that you always have time to work on your big goals, because things always come up, things are always urgent. But if you make sure that you create a schedule where your one thing time in the morning is always there, then you can always overlay that week with whatever you're working on. So in this particular instance, you can see the 18th through the 20th, I have a all-day task that says YouTube Foundation onboarding. So as long as things haven't drastically gone wrong, my one thing time on those days are going to be devoted to working on that goal. So this is how you make sure that you plan out how you're going to spend your weeks getting to your goals, and also making sure that you make time each day for your goals. So this is not a cut and dry process, right? Things do go wrong, but I just wanted to show you how you can actually week block and time block at the same time. And of course, I include buffer weeks as well, because sometimes you just need to make sure that there's extra time. And so once you have your one thing time and you have a general idea of what your goals are going to be, let's go ahead and go back to our week here. And now it's time to schedule your windows. And so windows are times throughout the day where you're going to open yourself up to communication. This is communication with clients, it's communication with potential business, this is communication with your team and friends and family. And the reason this is so important is you really want to make sure that you're not checking your phone every 10 or 15 minutes, that you're not in your inbox all day, because your inbox and your phone is just other people's to-do lists. So what you want to do is plan out when are you going to create that window, open yourself up to a new flood of information, change your plan or your time blocks, and then close yourself back up and get back to work. So in our particular instance here, I think right after breakfast would be a good time, 11 a.m. in the morning. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this team time. I'll save it, and then I'll go ahead and go in and make it repeat each day of the week through the end of the quarter. And before we hit save, I'm going to go ahead and change the color to yellow. Yellow I use for internal team stuff. I like to use tangerine for an actual meeting because it stands out really bright. And then when I'm creating content, I use blue, and anything that has to do with sales, green, and then anything that has to do with products, the flamingo. So this is an internal thing, so I'm going to go ahead and click save. And now I have my team time for 30 minutes. And what's really cool is I actually share my calendar with a lot of people on our team, and so they're actually able to come in here and see what I'm working on and when I'm actually going to be available for questions or checking our project management application to answer questions. And this is really critical when you're working on projects with other people. So for example, my video editor can easily come in and see when I'm editing videos, and other people can see when I'm actually going to be available in the project manager to answer questions. Of course, we're all in different time zones, so it doesn't always work out very well, but the next 30 minutes I'll devote to basic email. So something that I highly recommend is when you schedule your email time, the first email check should only be looking for things that's going to derail your day or something that's urgent. So if it's not something that's urgent or something that needs to essentially change how my time blocks are going to go, then I'll actually create another time block closer to the end of the day where I will actually check all the email and reply to all the emails. So I have two little windows for emails, one window for team. Obviously, it might be different for you. I'm going to quickly go ahead and change these colors to yellow, and we'd most likely have these go through the rest of the week or through the end of the quarter for whatever you're planning. So after this is as much as you should do on a weekly or monthly basis. So here I've been time blocking as if these time blocks are going to work for the entire quarter. You could be planning a month or just a couple of weeks, but if you're not planning this on a day-to-day basis, this is as much detail as you need, because you need flexibility in your schedule because things go wrong, things come up, and then you can make time blocks either on Sunday or during the week, during your team time or your free time in your email. It can be email/planning, where you'll actually add in how you're going to spend the rest of your time. And this is what I like to call buffer time, because you need plenty of time in your schedule to essentially adapt to things that go wrong. And this is all designed to protect your one thing time, because when it comes to your one thing and your goals, typically it's not something that's urgent. It's something that's very important and that's going to drive whatever you're trying to achieve forward, but there is a lot more urgent things that will pop up. So you want to make sure that the rest of your week is open enough where you can accommodate those changes without having to violate your one thing time in the morning. And the final step of this process, step number 7, is what makes Google Calendar so powerful and why I like using a digital version compared to just handwriting. And that is, as your day goes on, adjust your time blocks, right? Because what we're looking at right now is the ideal week. Well, it's almost never going to look exactly like this. So let's go to one of my previous months and let's go through a couple of my weeks and see how they actually turned out. And so I'm showing you this week and these other 2 sample weeks to show you it's really important that you go back and change your time blocks for what actually happened, because at the end of the month or the quarter, you'll be able to go back through these weeks and see how things actually played out, and most importantly, how long things took. Something that you'll notice here on this particular week, you'll see YT3.1. I have a over OCD code for when I'm filming or recording or working on client accounts, as you can see 3SF1. And the reason I use these is because you can actually use the search function to go and find all of the tasks based upon what they're called. So if you start calling things the same thing, like video recording, editing, copywriting, client reviews, client calls, you can actually search and see how long things actually took. And then all of a sudden, you can take actual data and improve your planning in the future. And so this is something that's been absolutely instrumental, especially as a content creator, because it's really easy for me to look at a video and say, yeah, it's probably gonna take me like 2 hours. But now I can go back and look at similar videos and exactly how long they took, so I'm much more effective with how long the time blocking actually takes. And before we wrap things up, I have one more tip for you, and that is to use a service for people to book calls with you. So this is an example page that we give to our clients, and so they can come in here and schedule their calls, so there's no emails back and forth, and I don't have to open up my email to know if I have a call in the afternoon. Now, obviously, I always put these during my buffer times, so as I'm planning out my week, I know when I already have calls, but I just wanted to recommend this service is called Book Like a Boss. Calendly is another great tool you can use to make sure that your time blocks are not harmed by client meetings. So thank you so much for watching. I sincerely hope you got some value out of this video and you enjoyed this overly deep dive into exactly how to use Google Calendar to time block your day. Comment below with your questions and how you keep track of your projects, timelines, and tasks. And of course, do your own time blocking, because your experience and insights is going to help other entrepreneurs and creators figure out how to be more successful with their day. So go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dive productivity videos just like this one, and until the next, keep building the business you love.